Hello and welcome to the PreSales podcast. It's your host and PreSales Collective General Manager, Chris Mabry. Today, I'm speaking with Matthew Young-James, Senior Solution Engineer at Codat, a 2024 PreSales Collective Ambassador, and he's become the New York City PreSales guy. How did that happen? We unpack it during the episode. Cross-departmental relationships, they're not a choice in our profession. They're a part of everyday life, and I'd argue they're part of the reason we exist. Today, Matthew and I discuss this very topic. We dive into his experience facing challenges, relationships, things he wished he would have done different, lessons learned over 5 years at a startup, and more. And I actually share a lot of my insight as well on how I've navigated difficult relationships and communication styles. There's a lot to unpack here. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Thank you so much for tuning in. Matthew Young-James, welcome to the PreSales podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris. It's really exciting to be here. Avid listener. I think my favorite place to listen is standing next to the treadmill or standing next to the weight rack. Not quite as good as if I was actually on the treadmill, but there must be at least 5 or 6 gyms throughout New York City that I've listened to this podcast in.
Well, excellent. At least we're making it next to the treadmill. I think the next step is to get on it, right? Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, positive momentum.
Yeah, exactly. It's exciting to have you here. You're huge in the community. You and I met in New York. We've been in touch many times again. My first question actually is around how you became the New York City pre-sales guy. So you're a senior sales engineer or a solutions engineer at Codat. You're a 2024 pre-sales collective ambassador. Thank you for doing that. And you've become this New York City pre-sales guy. Walk me through how that happened.
I think it comes down to really loving what we get the chance to do as pre-sales solutions engineers, solutions consultants. I got introduced to PSC, I guess, in 2021 when I moved over to New York. And this is where we're going next, because started getting out in the community and met some incredible people like yourself. And
thank you.
Saw this little gap. We've got Sales Engineers of New York as an amazing, amazing organization in this community. But I hadn't seen someone just grab the title for themselves. So I went ahead and did that. And look, if there are any listeners out there that would like to dethrone me, I honestly welcome it, because if you can do better than I can, you deserve it. So let's do it. Let's work on some stuff. Let's be exciting. I'll say that the New York City solutions engineering community has been really amazing to me. A couple of events like that have led to meeting people like Rue Dickinson and a whole bunch of solutions engineer friends. And Chris, you hosted a dinner here as well, which I had the lucky chance to be part of. And I heard some amazing things there. I brought along a friend, and this solutions engineering leader got a lot of attention because in the room, we had these really senior solutions engineering leaders of New York City. And I was kind of amazed. I was thinking, these are the organizations of tomorrow. You're hearing the ways that they're working. Some of these giant organizations are working like tiny startups. And I thought, that's not scalable at all. And some of them said, yeah, that's our secret. But then here's the thing. My friend has just started a role at a really, really early startup. And then they're all kind of paying attention to that. They're jealous. And I see that entrepreneurial mindset in the people of New York City, especially in our solutions engineers. I think that's what makes us unique. We love to talk to people and we love to try out new ideas and just push the envelope.
You're right. That dinner was fantastic. I'm actually going this week for another dinner because getting people in the room, I as well, I'll just be totally transparent. I'm sitting in there thinking, how did I end up in this room too? You have a global head of SEs over here and at Cisco and at Figma and at large companies and then startups. And your friend that you brought along the way, I think that was perfect because it reinvigorated everybody's entrepreneurial spirit. We love to build, we love to take things apart. And I think a lot of us, as we've learned, myself included, man, as I go into larger organizations or now that I'm running PreSales Collective, I'm like, I want to try the thing I didn't try before that I know works. And now I'm confident that I know it works. So I can put my stamp on it.
It was so cool to see that flash of fire in people's eyes. Wow, what would I do if I was at a small startup again? And being a startup myself, it gave me the incredible opportunity to reflect and kind of be thankful for that opportunity that I still have. I don't know where my career is going to take me. I've been in startups for 5 years. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that because the chance to sit back, reflect on what these things look like and where this journey takes us has been an exciting thing.
And it's something I focused on a lot lately, which is just paying attention to the maturity of organizations. And this doesn't have to do with numbers. Now, there's a certain line where, yeah, if you have sub 10 people there's going to be a very different model than if you have 30 people. But there's a certain spot where you can have a very mature solutions or pre-sales organization that is influencing all sorts of areas of the business. Like sometimes a very large company will have a very low maturity level, and in their overall influence, that affects people in our space, in our community, way more than they think. It affects your ability to enable. It affects your trajectory in your career. It affects who you meet. And so I see some startups have like a high level of maturity, and some large companies have a very low level of maturity. And these kind of dinners, these leadership meetings we do, I think a lot of people are learning like how to get to that next rung in the model.
100%. And not to play our own music, but I think that our organization has a really well-developed, a high degree of maturity solutions organization. And by that, I mean, we have the opportunity to influence what's happening on a go-to-market scale. And I don't even mean just deal specific. Yes, obviously relating specific product feedback and being able to create great proposals. Yes. But then also shaping the direction of our go-to-market strategy has been really exciting to be a part of, and also watch how the solutions engineering leaders that I work with have been able to leverage this incredible role. I see that as kind of like the way of tomorrow. I could talk about that for ages.
And I've been focusing on this on a handful of events. So if you're listening, you can go back to some of the webinars we've put on lately and stuff, and some of the summits. Is I'm trying to unpack the real working experience of that. Today, we're here to talk about like real relationships that you've had and your lessons learned of 5 years in startups, because let's face it, like things get pretty raw sometimes when you're working at a startup, and inevitably you're going to cross some sort of boundaries with other departments, other individuals. You're going to build some incredible bridges. You might tear down some as well along the way. I think the same goes for building an organization. We can go on that track for a long time. So let's pocket that. We'll save that for our next episode. Before we get into all the relationship side, I want you to talk about yourself for a minute. Tell us your story, because everybody has a unique journey into pre-sales. I've not actually heard how you got into the space at all. I've only met you as like the New York City pre-sales guy and in our community. So walk me through that.
I'll start with something that I think every solutions engineer loves to do. And that is they find one little thing that kind of catches them. There's a little fish hook, and then you just pull on that thread. And pulling on a thread is essentially how I ended up in solutions engineering. I had a slightly technical mindset that I like to credit my mother for. So we used to live in Southeast Asia, and it's actually very difficult to buy non-pirated software in Southeast Asia. It's actually way easier to buy pirated software. It's hard to find legitimate versions. But as part of that, you actually have to go and then manipulate some of the files within any different program that you download. Here we are on like Windows 97. We're going into right now. The files. Mom's on the command interface. And I'm watching this as a kid. So that's where I got started.
So she was editing the files to make them like operable or like non-pirated or something?
Exactly that. We were like editing it so they would actually work with our computer, because there were a lot of compatibility issues. And oh boy, don't we all know about compatibility issues and integrations?
How did she learn how to do that? Was it just common knowledge because there's so much of it or something? Or
she must be just the most incredible woman. I put a lot of success on what my mother taught me. I think she kind of just learned it all on her own, which is, again, a solutions engineering trait. So Mom, maybe you were a solutions engineer as well at one point.
Yeah.
Fast forward about 20 years, and I'm sitting at a career in banking, and I thought, okay, this is great. Very happy with this. I can also see a way forward. There must be another step where we're doing this in a more efficient way. So I started pulling on that thread, and I moved into fintech, and that's where things really got started. I actually did some legal studies. So I did 2 years of law school in London and took that knowledge. And at this RegTech fintech company, we were kind of translating the law into code and then automating different things that our clients were doing in shareholding disclosure. There's a lot of jargon there, but just keep with me for a second. And I pulled on that thread one more time. I thought, this is incredible. What if I go a layer deeper on two sides? kind of matching up what I love doing with talking to our clients and also understanding our product even more, and found the incredible opportunity that I now am working at. And I've been here for 4 years, and it's been quite the journey. Learning a lot of solutions engineering things along the way. I was lucky enough to be the first official solutions engineering hire of our SE manager, and seen a lot of growth and a lot of contraction and then even more growth along the way.
I'm seeing a lot of that right now in the market. When we're recording this, there's just an interesting solution engineering market, obviously. And I'm seeing a lot of posts that are like, hey, be the first SE, or maybe the second SE underneath a leader. How did you like that? It seems like that would fit your personality. I guess this comes into like this relationship talk, which is like, what were some of those lessons learned?
I mean, honestly, for the first 2 years, it was smooth sailing, because I think that was my extended honeymoon period. And there were a couple of things that went into that. We were still very fresh. We were raising funds. This is probably a familiar story to many. And the sky was blue in fintech. It was like there was no end. Valuations were high and capital was cheap. And it seemed like there were buyers around every corner. And we're hiring lots and lots of amazing people. If anyone knows how that fintech story ends, there was then this kind of market, let's call it a correction. And I think that's when we saw a lot of these fintechs like us kind of refocus and decide what our business model is going to be in this slightly readjusted market.
Yeah. I think one thing that's common in pre-sales or solution engineering is cross-departmental relationships. They're not a choice. We literally exist because we live in the gray area. We know more about product than sales, and more about sales than product. We know more about marketing than product, and more about product than marketing. We live in the white space, the gray space, every space, because that's our job, is to blend all of these departments together. And in the design, I literally picture in my head a hub and spoke of a bike wheel, and we're in the middle, because we are the ones who can translate from department to department. And this is why I'm always so hardcore on this like go-to-market influence thing, because I believe we're really in the center of everyone's needs of translation. Because of that design, what are some of the challenges you've experienced? Like, share some of your lessons learned and some of that experience in those cross-departmental relationships with us.
Absolutely. And this is what I'm really excited to get into today. What happens when you are working at a startup and you are constantly with people from other departments is you have a lot of people that care a lot about what they're doing and care about it from slightly different perspectives on that bike. So they're different spokes coming at it from different areas. And I remember probably the first time that I really got rattled by something. We as a department were relying on another department for a key piece of functionality that we were hoping to roll out for a couple of clients. And it didn't happen for whatever reason. I honestly couldn't even say it was anyone's fault, but it just didn't happen. And that, I think, led to a breakdown of trust. And this was many years ago at this point, thankfully smoothed over. But this is what I kind of learned from that, because what I saw in myself then was something that I now look back on and I think I wanted to grow through, because at the time, it was very easy for me to point fingers, and it was very easy for me to throw my hands up. And I kind of took that approach. I took a bit of the detractor approach. And I think that's something that can be common to a lot of people. It's the natural feeling. I came to realize maybe a year on that was a defining moment for me, but not the kind of defining moment that I wanted to create. And so I'm really thankful that I've had the opportunity to be in tough situations again like that and kind of turn it around. So I guess the lesson that I learned there is, instead of pointing the finger, is to walk through that and actually approach it with empathy and say, what if we are all on the same side of the table? Because guess what? You are.
Yeah.
Like, no matter who it is, whether it's you and your client, you and other teams in the organization, at the end of the day, you are on the same side of the table, because we're all trying to create a business together. And that takes all of us. I thought about that and I thought, okay, what if we are on the same side of the table? How can I, instead of giving away responsibility, actually take that on? What does it look like to communicate with clients in a way that we share the responsibility, us on the client communicating side, what if we're a part of this as well? And I think that was a big shift for me. It came through again many years later, and that was an interesting one to start off with.
And what was the adjustment like? Walk through a real life conversation, because I'm kind of picturing what the adjustment and the messaging to your prospect or your client is. But what does detractor mode look like, and what does post detractor mode look like?
I was going to internal stakeholders and saying things like, your actions have made it so that we can't present ourselves in the best light. And I'm painting myself pretty well here because I went in with a very aggressive hand. And I think that was just something that I realized was not helpful for anyone. Because here's the other thing that I realized. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, there is some sort of client situation. Maybe you're working with a partner from your organization and you've got an approach, your partner has an approach. Let's just say, for argument, my approach is 100% right. That's never true, by the way. But just for the sake of argument, if I'm 100% right about something, what is the right way to approach that? Me going in there and saying, my way is right, your way is wrong, is never the right way. That's not actually going to help. Because same as I said before, we are on the same side of the table. We want to get to something that's going to be good for both of us and for the client. And now bring it into the real world where my idea might not always be the right thing. In fact, it's not ever going to be 100% right. What does that look like? Definitely approaching it with empathy and asking questions like, how can I take the ideas on board instead of having kind of the hedgehog mentality of someone else is coming at you with asks, ideas, and then you're saying no. You're saying no to this because of what happened last time or because we've had issues with this in the past. Yes, that might be true, but what does it look like to flip that narrative on its head and kind of push through the challenges and have belief not only in yourself, but in your partners, in your organization, and the client base that you're building? And I found that that's how great things happen. I mean, think about all of the great things. I guess someone said the master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. And I think that's it, right? How do you take failure as part of this process, find safe ways to do that? And that's probably the discourse between you and your internal partners. Get those ideas out. Be like rocks in a stream, kind of bumping up against each other. Take that as natural, and you end up with a really smooth product. And then that's what you put in front of your clients.
There's 3 bits there. One is like, we're all on the same side of the table. I mean, I had a mentor who worked through this exercise with me one time, and it's like, if there's a lot of friction, then that individual you're working with, whether it's a client, maybe you have a frustrating client you work with, or an internal stakeholder, someone on your team. If they don't believe you're on their side, they're going to push back. They need to actually believe that you're on their team. If you picture a picnic table and you're facing one another, you need to actually get up, walk around to the other side of the picnic table and sit on the bench with that individual and look at the same thing. The moment you put yourself on the same side of the table, literally and physically and maybe mentally, the conversation changes and you're actually there for their success. In that process, I find that there's this detractor mindset that also kind of bleeds into the customer facing side too. A lot of SEs will go, yeah, we don't have that yet. Or let's say it's a feature, right? Yeah, we don't have that yet. I keep telling product that's what we need.
Yeah.
Or these little slide comments.
It's so easy.
Not helpful. It's so easy.
Get in there.
Say, I totally know what you mean, because if we had it, we could do X, Y, Z instead of being on the same team as your product team and understanding that they have a workload issue.
And you know what's so funny? I've definitely felt that. I've said those things. I've been in that situation, but I try my very best to same thing, flip it completely on its head, because there, I think, is a lot of power in, if there are other parties involved, just bring them into the room. Say something like, you know what? I wish my product people were here to hear that, because I know they would love to talk to you about it. Something like that. Right. And you could even say, that's so exciting for us. Can't wait to have these discussions. But we're busy, you're busy. And this is an opportunity as well to kind of actually build empathy with the client. Because look, every single client that you're working with also is RAM, right? They've got a workload, they've got a backlog that they will totally understand. I think that that's actually a really easy point for connection. We are sitting on the same side of the table, after all. It's like your world and my world, they look very similar. Let's act like that. And maybe that product person isn't sitting in this meeting, but they're still here. They're still at this table. It's like, all right, well, I can't wait to take this back. I'm going to have a great discussion with them and we'll let you know.
Yeah. It's obviously harder if you feel like product maybe doesn't take your feedback seriously.
You know what? We were in a place where it felt like that. And this was a long time ago now. And we shifted a couple of things to get out of that because we, as solutions engineers, we're on the go-to-market team. There's a product team. Look, sales and products, it's like Greek mythology. If there was Greek mythology of SaaS, these two gods would be at war all the time. But it doesn't have to be that way. What we did to kind of move out of that, I mean, not to go back to the same thing over and over, we changed our goals. We said, okay, product, your goals are not develop X number of things. It was not like put out pull requests. I don't think it was ever that, but I know there are some organizations where that's what it is. And it's not just, hey, go to market, go hit the number. Yeah, obviously that's important. Obviously that is the focus. But what if those two things were contextualized together? And this is like a really lucky thing that I think our organization saw. And I know there are going to be a lot of SEs out there that don't have the ability to make that kind of top-down change, but if you can, find someone that you can talk to, find someone that's trusted. And if you're feeling like there's misalignment there, that helped us a lot. So we kind of brought these things together and we ended up spending more time in these new kind of groups that we've formed, these kind of like cross-functional groups with product and sales. We spent more time in the same room than, let's say, out of it. And I think that was really helpful. So we had the same goal and we basically said like, we're not in this departmental thing. We're too small for that.
Yeah.
We are building a business. What if we're just like, imagine what it was like for Mark Zuckerberg in the early days. We're just like sitting there in one room and we're like, all right, what's going to work? How do we do this? And shifting that mindset was so, so important for us. And what came along with it was then another opportunity for some introspection and to say, all right, if I'm actually going to do that, if I'm going to step into that founding room, I kind of got to step up my game a little bit. Totally. I can't just hide behind someone else. I can't just hide behind a process. Yeah. I need to step in and say, all right, if there's a gap, we're all responsible for it. I can't say, oh, you should have done that. You should have done this prep. You should have built that feature. That's not how we're working anymore. We step into gaps together. We cover each other's faults. And it is, I think, the right way to create human flourishing at work because that feels so much better. And we actually get better outcomes as a result.
Yeah, well said. I mean, what I'm hearing is ownership. And there's like a tide shift in ownership. And it is a secret weapon. I feel that if, especially in today's market, if you are not somebody who naturally takes ownership or sees yourself in your role because you like that box you live in, you have to be outside the box more than you used to. And ownership is going to give you a new purpose. I'll share a story with you quick. My father was in oil and gas. He's retired now. He worked really hard. He worked offshore and all sorts of stuff. And he worked on these platforms that are extremely dangerous to work in. So nothing like you and I's day. I texted him the other day and I was like, I can't believe you used to have to ride a helicopter to work in a storm to just like clock in.
Sounded nice up until the storm.
Dangerous approach just to go to work. You know? Wow. And I think of just how privileged some of us are with our environments we work in and with what we be. We get to sit and talk on things like this, and a practice that they have, because I think things are dangerous, is in a certain seniority, you couldn't approach, say, the person who runs the platform, captain, I don't know what their titles are. You couldn't approach them with problems without 3 viable solutions. It was a rule. So that person's job was actually not to come up with a solution. Their job was to make a decision between 3 viable solutions that would work. So their job was to quickly make one of 3 choices. And those choices literally had lives impacted on the other side of them. They didn't have time to build all the processes that could be the viable solution. This is a big turning point in my career too, was the detractor. It's easy to be the person on the team meeting that points fingers or brings a problem. Like, it's easy to find problems. You see it just in life in general. It's easy for people to point at problems because it's like half the way there. It's your first step. But pointing out a problem without any sort of resolution or any kind of advice on how you're going to get out of the problem, it doesn't really help you build rapport. It doesn't help the team meeting. It doesn't help you and your career probably.
Yeah. It's this interesting trade-off. And I felt this too, because you know what? It can be tough sometimes. Sometimes we take things home and there are situations that are difficult to work in. And you get this trade-off.
Oh, yeah.
What if I just pointed out a problem and kind of like threw some negative energy in? What's happening there is I'm going to feel a little bit better. It's going to help me like a little bit in the short term. But then maybe tomorrow I don't feel so good about it. And actually, I've brought myself down because I've created this negative energy. But you think about it again, you flip that around. If you lean in and you present some ideas, some solutions instead, you just inject that tiny bit of positive energy. I think energy is contagious and it builds momentum, whichever direction it is, negative or positive. I don't know if you've ever been like in a room of high schoolers recently, but I think you can see this sometimes. Just walking out sometimes in New York City, you like see groups of high schoolers and someone will say something and it's almost like the rest of the group's kind of waiting for the first person to decide what they think about that. It's like, is that funny? Or do I hate that? And whichever one it is, the whole group's going to get it on it. And I think it's similar, right? As people, we're social. And so just that little bit of energy, either in the positive or negative direction, can really shift the tone of a meeting, shift the tone of a client engagement, and can even shift what it looks like when things are difficult. I'll tell you about a time that I think of here. There was this deal that we were working on once upon a time, and it was a grueling deal. It was the Sisyphus deal. Push the boulder up to the top. Looks like we're still back at the bottom again. You got to push that boulder right back up.
How long were you working on this deal?
It was about a year.
Oh,
It's
gosh.
an enterprise size contract.
Oh, the email threads are so big at that point.
Oh, yeah.
The folders.
The folders, the iterations on all of the different pieces of work that we did. And I mean, I'm sure we probably iterated some slide decks 20, 30 times.
Oh, yeah.
At the time, this became a real grind for me. This was grating and it was very tough. And we ran into some difficulties. Me and my partner were kind of looking at this whole thing and we said, I feel like this is not going well. We were feeling emotional about this. And we both kind of took a step back and we said, all right, let's just start in the facts. There's no need to start by saying we're going to assign blame. I think that that's not where we want to go. We want to actually say, all right, we're feeling some difficulty right now. Why is that? Looks like client expectations have shifted a little bit. We just had a new quarter start. So there's kind of like some shifting in the way we're running go to market. We have new partners to work with that we're bringing in, which was actually a great thing, right? We got some people from marketing that were also going to be giving input on a couple of specifics that we were working on. But all of these things were kind of shifting tides. And we found ourselves in the middle of a grueling yet exciting deal. And I think all of these things just led to instability. But we kind of named that. We said, all right, it's understandable that we're here. It's understandable that we're feeling this way. And we actually have options. It's not the end of the road. We can still keep going. Guess what? We'll iterate on the deck again.
Yeah.
We can keep going. Yeah. And suddenly the whole thing became a lot lighter. It became an opportunity to come in and redo some of the stuff that we had done before. Because in that interim time, we had actually learned a lot of things. Yeah, we had already done a piece of work, but that piece of work that we did a month ago, by now, we can do like a 2.0. We can basically double how good this is going to be and double the reception that the client had. And you know what? We went and we saw that client. We saw them on site. And it was probably one of the best meetings that I've ever had in my whole career. Some of their people were saying, hey, it's so great that you guys came here. You're injecting a lot of positive energy. And I feel like I'm learning a lot from you, not just on our industry, but like how to also engage with people that you're in the room with, which was really, really exciting.
Wow. This is bringing me back to a story about launching a product that I was involved in. It's very relevant. You can go down this path for a long time and things start to really build tension. Along the way, you get way better at what you're focused on. So you're making better decisions, but you're looking back on maybe a body of work or a product that doesn't really fit the need that you found. It's really, really hard to stop that momentum and take a step back. So how did you guys find that point where you're like, look, let's go way high level because we need to reset? Like hitting the reset button is key. I think good leaders know how to do that. And I think they bring things back to crayon and paper really well. did you work with one person in this process that was like open to it? Or like, how did you start that? Somebody listening right now is like, I'm in that deal that Matthew's talking about.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I wanted to talk about this, because I kind of wished that someone had almost given me this idea, this permission to say, hey, you can do that reset. That's in your control. And I think that was the really empowering moment. How we got there, I think the best way I can say it is like these little shadows kept following me home. And I'm thinking about the deal, and I'm thinking I might have let down some of the partners that I'm working with in some of the work that I did or the things that I said. And those things were just coming back to haunt me a lot. I'd be sitting there on a Saturday morning, kind of just wanting to enjoy a nice cup of tea, looking out at the skyline. And instead, I'm like thinking about all of the tough things that we did during the work on that deal. I'm like, this is supposed to be my recharge time, but all it is like coping right now. After probably like 2 months of thinking like that, I said, all right, there's got to be something here. And I guess to any listener that might be thinking, all right, I'm in a tough situation. That was the big thing for me. I said, there must be something I can do. It feels like a lot of this is out of my control, but what if I start with what is in my control? And I kind of identified maybe 3 things. One, it's my mindset. And that was kind of like inclusive of itself. It's a little bit inception-y. It's like, all right, I'm going to shift my mindset. And that's the first thing that I'm going to do. And then the second thing that I'm going to do is approach this situation with our partners and with our clients kind of on the front foot instead. And we'll do that reset. We'll start with facts. We'll say, all right, here are the challenges and changes that led us to where we are today. Let's take stock and decide on what our next step is. And then I think this is the third one, which kind of maybe embarrassingly took me longer than I would like to admit. I realized has to be a part of this as well. It's not just showing up in your mindset. It's not just showing up in those relationships. But one of the really powerful things that you can do is then back it up with the quality of your work. And that was like actually quite hard for me, because I kept thinking to myself, I've been putting myself into this so much. I've really been putting a lot of time and effort and thought into this. But you know what? Now is the time. Now is the big push on that lever, because I think once you have that mindset and once you build that bridge with your key stakeholders, you've got yourself a lever. And that is the lever that's going to take that same effort that you're putting forward, and that's going to move the boulder.
And that's the time to basically put all your cards on the table.
Yeah.
Mindset is a big topic, and getting there first is like really hard. And I know what you mean by going home and taking something home and dwelling on it. It's Saturday morning and you're like, why am I thinking about this deal? Or if you manage a team, why am I thinking about this team member? Or, what are some of the ways you change your mindset? Like, what works for you? Everybody's got a different approach.
Yeah, 100%. For me, I, at some point, picked up the strange hobby of running. And so just finding those little places where you are in flow, I think is so helpful. If there's a way to create that space for yourself that is unrelated. And you know what? Sometimes the challenges would still follow me, because, running is a big mental game as well. But even putting it in that context, running for me is a place that I can go and create something. I'm creating this experience for myself. I'm moving my body. It changes the way I'm thinking about it. Even if it's still challenging, I've now put that challenge into a context that I'm creating, which is like first little step. It's like that little tip. Once you get to the top of the mountain, you're all right. Now I'm on the other side.
There's one thing I heard from a podcast. I listened to a Rich Roll podcast, and he's an ultra marathon guy. And he, on one of his episodes, said, movement is before the mindset. I think a lot of people get it backwards, where like, oh, I've got to get in the mindset to go work out, or I've got to get my mind right. I've got to get my motivation right. I've got to get this, that. The movement is actually first. Even if you get into, yoga, like the whole creation of yoga. I do yoga sometimes if I can. I've got 2 young kids. It's hard to get out of the house to do anything for myself, but I bike and I do all that stuff too. The entire purpose, and I'm going to get a lot of this wrong, is the movement was only there to get your mindset right. So the yoga that we all know of as people trying to bend around and move their bodies, that's just to get you to a point where you can relax and get into the end of your sessions. Movement comes before mindset. is what I'd like to double down on there.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And here's an idea of what movement looks like in, let's say, the professional context, because I think we can all imagine what that looks like. All right, if I'm going to go work out, I get in the car, I drive to the gym, or I walk to the gym, and I walk in there and I just put my hand on the weights. All right, now I'm like taking that intention, or I put my running shoes on and I walk out the door. I feel like going back to bed, but I'm walking out that door. I'm going to start running. What this looked like for me in the professional context was even writing down some of the changes in approach that I wanted to try out with my partners. So writing down some things like, here are the 3 things that have led to us being challenged right now. Or here are the 3 opportunities that I see that I can bring to this table. And I want to do that and want to level up in these ways to move forward. Because you know what? I think most of the time, if you say, all right, regardless of where we are, here's some ideas of what I want to do to step up, that's pushing in the right direction. And it can be really hard to say those things in the moment, but what if you write them down ahead of time? And that really helped me. I think another thing that you can do there is bring in trusted mentors and advisors. I think that's another way of getting the momentum going, because these things can be vulnerable. It can be hard to talk about them, and it can be hard to talk about them even with people that you trust. But once you start that conversation, that's again you saying like, I'm not going to be defeated in my mindset here. I'm going to step forward. You set up a little call and say, all right, I've got something that I need to talk to you about. And it's like, I can't talk to you about it until we get on that call, but don't let me get off the call until we talk about it.
Yeah, I love that. You could even leverage somebody like, I love outside perspective. Reach out to somebody at PreSales Collective.
100%. Hey, I've done that. And it was incredible, the advice that I got.
Like, here's a deal I'm working on. And for me, it feels really heavy. But for that individual on the other side of that coffee chat, they have no stake in it. It doesn't feel heavy at all. They'll probably have a different perspective.
Yeah. You know, my managing line changed at a certain point in time. And I didn't really know how to feel about it. It was kind of the first time that I'd ever been through something like that. So I was feeling a little unsettled. Yeah. And I asked someone at the PreSales Collective that I knew had probably seen something like this, maybe even made those changes themselves. And this person said to me, you know what? It happens. You will report to new people will report to you. You've got a long career ahead of you. It's all part of the journey. Yes. And you know what? Your work stands for itself, and that will always be true. No one can take that away. I was lucky enough as well that change in my reporting structure actually was a great thing for me. It was a great opportunity to learn from a new side of this organization. That little push, I think, helped me appreciate what this was for me. It was an opportunity. It was not a setback.
Yeah, that's awesome. So sometimes I just say exactly how things feel. And it's easier if you're in a management position, or I guess not. Maybe I'll take that back. I guess it's doubly effective if you're an IC or manager, is I will literally stop a call and say out loud, this feels hard. There's something here in this conversation that feels difficult. It could be a person, it could be the topic, it could be the project, because we've talked about it so many times. But there's just something here that feels more difficult than it should. And I think we need to reset and like re-level what we're talking about. And maybe that means we just take a 15-minute break and come back. But I will just literally state, like, there's just something here that isn't working, and acknowledge it, because everybody is feeling it. And I think the moment you acknowledge the elephant in the room, people go, yeah, because, or whatever will come out of them.
Yeah.
And then you'll get the real reason, and you'll say, yeah, but Jim's on your side. But just state the obvious.
100%. I had never thought about it like that, but I think that happened as well along some of these challenging deals I worked on. You're just in it so much.
Yeah.
And you just get tense, more and more tense as the challenges come your way. And then someone says something like, something feels off here. And it feels like an exhale, like, I'm glad someone said it. Yeah, you're kind of right. And then you go, all right, what can we do to reset? 5-minute breaks, like always a good idea.
There's a moment of that exhale. If you manage people and you're listening to this, if you had any trouble managing people, you get to the bottom of where that comes from, you're like, oh man, I got to let that go, because you may be bringing it home. This would be like an amazing product. If you and I could design something that basically let people, when they logged off work, forget about the challenge that they had, then I think we would have a business that would be, we wouldn't be doing really anything.
I think it's so I like to drink tea a lot. I know a lot of people like to drink coffee.
Yeah.
It's maybe like on the side of your mug, it's a little attachment. And
Oh, yeah.
you take that thought in your head and you put it in there, and you can pick it up on Monday again if you really need it.
But you can only access it with a current subscription.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you got to build a SaaS model. And then
prices are going up.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, it's got AI, so it will respond on your behalf now.
AI is totally involved, 100%. What were some of the things you were taking home? What about it was hard? That like hard enough for you to like dwell on later?
Wow. You know what? Here's, I think, one of the things that kind of hit me. It was in a deal that was similar to the one I was just talking about, not the exact same one, but I was working with someone that I had worked with before, and we had actually created a lot of success. So we had some great deals a couple of years in the past, and we were in this one, and it felt like things were different. It felt like things had shifted. And I think that was hard for me because it felt like the approach that I was taking, which felt similar, was leaving me a little high and dry. And I think to some extent that might have been true. I think that maybe it was time to kind of evolve and say, like, I'm not happy to just do the thing that I did that brought us success before. What actually made us successful is that we were pushing the boundary and we were constantly trying to be on the same team and trying out new things. It was not the fact that we did those exact set of actions. It's not the fact that I put together a proposal in this exact format. That wasn't what led us to be successful. It was the leaning in together and constantly being on the same team. That's what made us successful. I think that was a hard thing for me to think through, realize. But then, as you can kind of hear, I put myself into this. And I didn't say, this person has changed, or this deal has changed, or something is different. Those were all thoughts that presented themselves to me. And I decided to move through that and say, no, you know what? I'm here. I'm the constant. How can I show up in the way that is going to make the biggest impact right now? And what does that look like, again, to shift that mindset? That's part of the reason that I love being a solutions engineer. It's actually trying out new things and not being okay with the status quo. That's why I moved into fintech in the first place, because I wanted to try out new ideas and make things work better and be efficient in this amazing world of banking. So once I unlocked the fact that this actually was talking to the person that I want to be at work, that was also a really big unlock.
Oh, wow. Well said. Yeah. I mean, if we wanted easy jobs, none of us would be here.
No.
I've always used this line with people who are going through challenges as a solution engineer or consultant, is like, I don't want to respond and say, hey, but we asked for this, but we did. We asked for these challenges. Like, if I wanted a boring job, I would not be doing this.
Yeah.
This is not a boring job. It's not an easy job. It's a hard job, right? It's a job where there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of reward. There's a lot of growth, and you have to be hungry for that growth.
This is such a funny thing, but there is this line in James Cameron's Avatar, and I think it's Michelle Rodriguez. Her character says something like, oh, this isn't what I signed up for, but she's like a military helicopter pilot, and she's piloting a military helicopter. And it's kind of like, isn't this exactly what you signed up for? Maybe it's not so dramatic. Maybe it's not so violent, but we are there driving in that helicopter, figuring out the right path ahead for the deal. So yeah, we're signing up for these deals. We're signing up for the excitement, the bumps. I mean, that is what makes it fun at the end of the day.
Yeah, the consistent change. I went through an exercise at a go-to-market offsite one time. This person was leading this thing and put us all in the middle of the room and then said, if you're comfortable with change, go to the right. And going to the right meant that you were like 100% comfortable with change. Going to the left meant you were not comfortable with change whatsoever. Well, all of us were like type A, go-to-market people. And, you're looking around, your boss is right next to you, the CEO's around the corner. So everybody moves over to the right and says, we're 100% comfortable with change. But then he asks, well, what about change you have no say in or influence in?
Ooh.
And everybody moves back to the middle. And I think that's the key of change is hard, but it is much harder if it comes down on you and you have no influence over that change. That's what actually makes like a large or a high degree of change really difficult. And I think about this when I think of policies or I think of ways to change go-to-market and whatever. People have to have skin in the game. But when things come top down or bottoms up, they feel differently. So where do you think this work starts? You've gone through this tremendous amount of change. Does it start top down, bottom up? What's your advice on that?
What I've found is, I guess, look, people call me MJ, my initials. And just like Michael Jackson said, start with the person in the mirror, because that is always what you can control. Not everyone is lucky enough to be able to control that top-down mindset. I think all of us can influence it, but ultimately there may be things that still have to happen to us, right? Just like in a deal or at an organization, there will be changes, and we have to work with that. But what we can change and what we don't always have to work with, you don't have to work with the version of ourselves that we see in the mirror right now. That's something you can change. For me, it was, okay, if things are tough, let's name that. Kind of like what you said. Things are tough right now. What are some of the things that I can level up? Level up that mindset, level up the way that I'm collaborating with the people around me. Because like you said, we're collaborating with a lot of people. Is there a collaboration that's missing here? Do I need some marketing help? If we're making a big push on the sales front, maybe marketing can help us out. Or actually, maybe it's product. Maybe we bring in product to achieve a new outcome that we've never got before. If you're trying over and over the same thing and it's not working, trying it again is probably not the best idea.
Right.
Try something new. Right. You've got incredible people around you. You've got great organizational setups that you can try. And I'm seeing the power in that now. And then finally, leveling up what the quality of work looks like. I mean, those are the three big things for me. Those are always in your control, no matter what is happening with the deal, no matter what's happening internally, externally. And I guess that's what makes us solutions engineers. I'll tell you this too. These were reflections from a little while ago, and very, very happy to say that things are in flow at the moment. And we just had a new AE join. And now I'm almost on the flip side. I'm thinking like, all right, how do we set ourselves up for success here? Yeah. And it was to lean in and do the same thing. I came up with this new idea. It's like, all right, here's how you as an AE and me as an SE can partner together the best way, give you a resource, and like, let's keep that open dialogue. And I think it's been working really great so far.
That's the next thing on your social plan. I want to see a playbook on how you've implemented this, like a 5-step process.
If I can come up with some nice AI generated graphic, maybe you'll see that.
Yeah. I always have a tendency to think of the person who says, okay, I've heard what you said. I heard a lot of this and it sounds great. But I think where it all really starts, and this is something you're good at, is like communication. It all starts with communication. And maybe that first step is openly communicating the pain in which is in the room and saying, even just a trusted advisor on your team, hey, Jill, I know we talk about XY deal a lot. You and I meet 5 times a week. It's getting really hard for me. Something's got to change. I just know that all of us have a lot of tension. Can you and I work on this for a little bit and just see, like, I want to see if you feel that way. And if you do, like, how can we make this better?
Yeah, 100%. Right. Those kinds of conversations are tough, necessary, and make us stronger.
Yeah. I reported some great managers who taught me a lot along the way. I would call them on, at like 7:00 on a Friday, because I would literally call them and I would say, Dan or Monal or the others I was reporting to, I got to get this off my chest, because I know if I don't right now, then it's going to sit through the weekend. And one thing that I believe is that conflict that rests grows. So conflict that sits grows. It doesn't get smaller over time. So the moment I feel that tension, I actively tackle it. Like a linebacker, I'm going after it as quickly as I can to squash it so it doesn't grow.
That's a great tip. I think I might have to incorporate that one as well.
The moment it's there, you just open it up and you say, I don't want to go into my Saturday thinking about this. At this point, I think I will. I know it's uncomfortable. I know you're in the car. I know that this is inconvenient. But if I don't get it off my chest, it's going to ruin my weekend and I need to recuperate.
Yeah. I think the best thing that I found that is not quite what we were going to create and put it on the side of your coffee mug is just, if there's nothing else, just write it down. Write down 2 things. Write down the feelings, the situation that we're in. How do we feel about this? And then write down what your ideal next step would look like. And then if you're then walking into the weekend, at least that gives you some mental separation. You pick it up on Monday. Maybe those feelings feel familiar. Maybe they have changed a little bit. But probably the way you want to approach it has changed. Probably that's changed. So that's good.
Yeah, I like that too. I mean, Ernest Hemingway says, like, if you have writer's block, you have to sit down and write 3 facts.
Yeah.
And it could be simple as the sky is blue, my water cup is brown, and my watch needs to be wound because my watch is sitting here and it is not moving. That could start something, right? So you could say, the deal is stalled, XYZ, just write it out. So
like on Monday, we got to push for another call or something.
yeah,
Monday
right.
rolls around, you're like, that's too aggressive. Then you can start workshopping it.
Oh, Monday would come around and every one of my Friday suggestions is too aggressive.
Exactly.
Every one of them. Even my ideas, I always got new ideas. And on Monday, I'm like, let's go ahead and reevaluate that. All right. We're going to switch over to the rapid fire question round. And then we will recap with ways to get a hold of you. So the first question is, what are some of your biggest pet peeves in solution engineering demos?
This one's going to ruffle some feathers. It's going to ruffle the feathers of my boss because I know we feel differently about this. I do not like when people say, does that make sense?
Appreciate that.
And here's an alternative. How does this compare to what you're doing today?
I love that. I would have a tendency to ask, does this make sense? Or I think what you're trying to get out of that comment is validation that you are showing something that resonates with the buyer or the prospect. And there are probably much better ways to get that validation.
I'd say, yeah, assume the comparison. And if you're totally off base, don't worry, they'll tell you.
The more you ask, the more data you get. The more information you have, the better your call is.
And that's a gift. This is one of the things that I always think about when our clients are talking. It's every little answer they give you, every objection, that's a gift that they're giving to you for us to be able to then forge a better connection and understanding about what their world looks like.
Well said. What's the number one book you recommend to friends?
An oldie but a goodie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's kind of corny, but I think it really shifted my mindset in every part of my life more than probably any other book that comes to mind right now.
Love it. When you're not busy being the New York City solution engineer, what do? You've covered running. What else?
Talked about running. I love to make music. There is a blurred out guitar on my wall right now because of the Zoom background. I love to write music. I recently wrote the first song that I have written since moving to New York, which was very exciting. And hopefully that is momentum to create some more.
Nice. Maybe it'll be the intro song to the PreSales podcast someday.
Let's talk.
There's an amazing amount of solution consultants that play music. I think it's just hand in hand.
Must be something about that. Solutions engineering band, maybe?
Yeah. What's something that most people don't know about you?
Most people don't know that I am British. You wouldn't know it by listening to me talk, but my dad is a thoroughbred Londoner. We moved around, and actually I ended up growing up near to where you are now, Chris, in upstate New York.
Yeah, I would have had no idea. Matthew Young James, the British kid who grew up in Southeast Asia, who became the New York City solution engineer, finance, fintech guy.
Yeah, try and fit that into one sentence. People say like, oh, tell me about yourself. I'm like, you got some coffee?
All right. Well, tell us the best way to get a hold of you.
I'm on LinkedIn. Find me there and shoot me a message. I would love to chat if you've got ideas for what solutions engineering could look like, or if you were dealing with your Sisyphus deal. Oh boy, let's talk about it.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Well, Matthew Young James, thank you so much for joining the PreSales podcast. I'll see you in New York soon. But until then, take care.
Chris, it's a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you for joining me today on this epic adventure with Matthew Young James. There are so many takeaways in this episode. If you listened, please let me know what your favorite part is, what some of your takeaways are. You can find me on LinkedIn, share it with your friends. I'm trying to get better and better at bringing great content on this podcast. Feedback is crucial. You can find Matthew on LinkedIn, where he hopefully shares his practice building his new process with his AE and so much more. Thank you for tuning in. At PreSales Collective, we're really about learning, connecting, and growing together. I believe investing in these 3 pillars will greatly increase your success and happiness at work and in life. So see you next time on the PreSales podcast.